we're going to begin with that big news overseas. We begin this morning in the Middle East in the fragile ceasefire with Iran just days away from expiring. U.S. negotiators are set to head back to Pakistan for another round of peace talks, but Iran says it currently has no plans to attend. Meanwhile, the standoff in the Strait of Hormuz intensified over the weekend as U.S. forces opened fire and seized an Iranian-flagged vessel. Tehran has vowed to respond. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab is following the latest from Pakistan's capital, Islamabad.
Well, the stakes here in Islamabad could not be higher. We were here just over a week ago when the highest level talks between American and Iranian officials in nearly 50 years broke down after a marathon 21 hours of talks without a deal. Now, at the core, all these issues that have been in place still remain, like Iran's nuclear program and enrichment capabilities, as well as its proxies across the region, including in war-battered Lebanon, where a shaky ceasefire with Israel now holds. Now, overnight, Tehran signaled it may not even return to the negotiating table, accusing Washington of, quote, acts of aggression after an Iranian merchant ship was attacked and seized by U.S. forces in the Strait of Hormuz as it attempted to cross a naval blockade. Now, the narrow waterway remains the key sticking point, and journalists have been banned from entering the state since the start of the war. But we were able to gain rare access by posing as tourists. As we sailed through, we saw crystal clear blue water, rugged coastline, and at one point had dolphins follow us. And then we saw ship after ship after ship just sitting there for over 7 weeks now. Cargo ships and tankers have barely moved through one of the most important energy corridors in the world. So as talks resume here in Islamabad, if they resume, the question is whether diplomacy can get that traffic moving again or whether it's a return to all-out war. And it has to be said that ahead of talks like this, both sides will often raise the temperature to gain leverage over each other. So this kind of brinksmanship we're seeing right now isn't entirely unusual. But this time, things are a bit more serious. The U.S. attack and seizure of that Iranian vessel is a major escalation, and it's already strengthening hardliners in Tehran who are opposed to any kind of talks in the first place. That said, Iran's top negotiators do want a path out of this conflict. If they believe there's a credible deal on the table, they're likely to show up here in Islamabad. But the stark reality is this: a lot can change between now and when those talks are supposed to begin. Back to you.
It sure can. Imtiaz Tyab, thank you so much.
CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro joins us now from the White House with more on all of this. Good morning, Aaron. So all of this could change at any moment, but what is the White House currently saying about this new round of peace talks, especially if Iran says it won't be there?
Good morning. We have been asked into the White House as they have not yet made a comment on Iran saying it is not attending these talks. And we do not know specifically when the vice president is expected to leave for Pakistan and Islamabad. The expectation is that they would arrive this evening. Over the weekend, the White House has said that they will start with the same terms that they came to their last direct talks with Iran. No, a commitment from Iran to not enrich uranium that could then be used to build a nuclear weapon, and also a full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. The UN ambassador to the United States, Mike Waltz, said on Face the Nation yesterday that while the U.S. is, quote, never going to take an approach of trust with Iran, he's hoping that sending Vice President J.D. Vance will send a signal and a message that the U.S. is still very serious about reaching some sort of agreement. Take a listen to what he said this past Sunday.
The Iranian side's in a bit of chaos. This is absolutely due to the devastating strikes on their leadership. But I think the vice president leading shows the level of engagement from the U.S. side, that we are absolutely serious. And I, for one, thank God for future generations that we are arresting a problem before it's too late. We're not waiting until the U.S. has no options and Iran has some kind of breakout, which would lead to a nuclear breakout all over the Middle East.
Now, one open question is who would even represent Iran in these talks, as there has been confusion as Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, who represented Iran in the last direct negotiations with J.D. Vance, has clashed publicly with Iran's Revolutionary Guard on whether the country would attack shipping coming through the Strait of Hormuz.
So many questions that are still open, Aaron. Let's talk about what the president was saying. He's been doubling down on threats against Iranian infrastructure. We've heard him do this before. Is there a sense that this might be a negotiating tactic to get them to the table?
It seems clear that this is the president's negotiating tactic to oscillate between these grand threats of attacking Iran's civilian infrastructure and then claiming on the other option that there is some sort of a breakthrough that is imminent in these negotiations. It is unclear, though, whether these threats carry the same weight as before, where about 2 weeks ago he warned that, quote, a whole civilization will die, only to agree to a 2-week ceasefire just hours before his own self-imposed deadline. But the administration is ready to argue that if the president does escalate this and attacks Iran's civilian infrastructure, that it is not a war crime, as Walt said on Face the Nation yesterday, that bridges and power plants are already being ran by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. But it's clear that this is the biggest leverage point that the U.S. has, these grand threats of attacking bridges and power plants, as Iran has used its own leverage point of the Strait of Hormuz.
All right, Aaron, a lot to watch. Thanks very much.